Welcome to Conversations with Healers, a podcast and video interview series that features intimate, soulful, and cozy conversations with self-healers and healers. Healer to healer, we dive into all aspects of self-healing and healing, and being and becoming a healer. I am Damla Aktekin. I am a healer and the host of this podcast, and I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation. Hello everyone, this is Damla Aktekin with A Drop of Om, and today I'm excited to chat with Rob Stewart, who is a good friend, also a healer. He does hypnotherapy, he's an hypnotist, past life regression, he's an astrology enthusiast. You do quite a few things. So I like to ask people to start with, tell us about your self-healing journey leading up to you becoming a healer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a long story. Which I won't give you the long story version of it. It's been a long time coming. The physical healing is more recent. That's been since 2016 or so. I had Lyme disease and mold illness, and I was diagnosed in 2016 with those. But it took a while to figure out what was going on. It's a pretty standard path that I've had with the Lyme disease. But it took a lot of seeing different people, going with intuition, and seeing who to see. It's been a big journey, and I consider Lyme disease to be a spiritual teachings for dummies. And I don't know if other Lymeys are dummies, but I know that I am, in that when I'm out of alignment, when I'm in anxiety or fear, the body hurts. I get instant feedback. And so this whole experience has been, it's been really humbling, but it's also been a tremendous teacher, because I get instant feedback in a big way. And so I'm grateful for that. I've grown a lot through that. But it's been a tricky journey. It's a pretty standard Lyme mold journey. Yeah.
Okay. You defined, when we were talking with you, you defined self-healing as self-understanding and self-love. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the word love and understanding and healing to me are the same. And we talk so much about self-love and about all, what is self-love? We can, it's sort of hard to put your finger on, when you feel it. But for me, self-understanding is a way to get to self-love. And it's a type of understanding that leads to forgiveness of oneself and others. It's a type of understanding that emotions are understood, the feelings that we have, the anger, the frustration, the fear, and having it be okay. That's the type of understanding that I find leads to healing, and it certainly has in my life. And not only in the physical world, which it definitely, there's no mystery that it's connected, emotional and physical, but also in my, the daily life. So the more that I can really understand these emotions that I have, I think in this world, it's so easy for us to strip ourselves from those emotions. We're taught to feel a certain way about them, to think there's something that they're not. And so to really get intimate with those emotions and those feelings, for me, has been a really big healing journey.
How do you understand those emotions?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Byron Katie, the work of Byron Katie. And so what she teaches is taking a thought, a sentence, and dissecting it, looking at, is it true? Is it true? A big one for me is there was a belief that I had to be agreed with to be loved. And that's something, in different families, different cultures, and different environments, we take these beliefs. And that was a big one for me. That for some reason, if I felt disagreed with, that I wasn't being loved. And so it took some time. It takes a lot of inquiry and sitting in that space to explore those emotions. And I have a long way to go.
Which can be uncomfortable, right? We don't
What's
always
that?
want, which can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We don't always want to go there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that when you're describing your journey on your website, you said your healing journey was also about understanding the experiences and metaphors behind emotional and physical discomfort.
Yeah.
So emotions and physical discomfort sort of coming into our lives as metaphors. Can you give us an example of how that appeared for you?
Yeah. A big one, just being totally honest, just being as humble as I can. And it's just the truth. And that different pain in my body, if I were to visualize hugging that pain, just being with it, not in a way of restricting it, not that type of a hug, but just a warm hug, and being there for that pain as if it's a child, looking for connection. That type of metaphor, that type of working with that feeling or that hurt or that physical hurt, because it's not always a feeling, it's like a symptom, basically. To be there with it without judgment, without saying it's wrong or it's good, it's bad, it's right, it's wrong, but to be there with it and to be okay with it. And in truth, I'm not able to do that all the time. I wish I were. But it's a big part of it. And so that's what I mean with the metaphors. And the work that I do with hypnosis, just to be clear, I'm a hypnotist, and the hypnotherapist carries weight with it that I'm not licensed, I'm not a therapist and all that. And, but I'm a hypnotist, and I find that there's certain metaphors that can be explored. One is, sometimes I'll go sort of deep into a well, I guess you'd say, just visualizing going down. We tend to want to go up. We want to go into the higher octaves of energy. At least, I know I do. But I've found that going down into the discomfort, this sort of, for me, there's a real vibration because of the Bartonella and the Babesia type of disease. But to go down into those uncomfortable areas and be okay with it, which isn't all the time, it really loosens things up. It finds peace, it finds balance, it finds expression and outside of judgment. And so that's just another metaphor that works for me anyways, and others that I do sessions with.
Yeah. Okay. So how did all of this lead to you becoming a hypnotist? And you also do past life regression therapy and astrology a little bit. So how did that happen?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. The truth is, so I was certified as a hypnotist before I was even sick with Lyme and mold and all that stuff. And by the way, for the listeners, very few people know about the mold side of things. There's some of us, about 20% of people have genetic disposition that we don't know how to detox mold from the body. And it's like our body doesn't recognize what's us and what's not. And and the symptoms of the mold are very similar to Lyme itself. So sometimes it can be confusing, and if anyone's interested, they can contact me, of course, but the Dr. Shoemaker protocol is a really good one for mold. So I just want to get that out there before I forget. But okay, so why did I get into hypnosis? My life changed in a big way about 11 years ago. Truth is, my dog died, and it was a big emotional thing, and something shifted in me. I just became more interested in the unseen. I started looking into things that just more spiritual in nature, and it turned my world upside down. And so I realized I didn't know what I thought I knew, and I'm finding that now too. That's sort of the guideline. And hypnosis is something that is so fascinating because it's mysterious. Like, I don't know what hypnosis is. It's a very deep state of meditation in one context. And it's a very relaxed state. I call it the natural state, that deep meditative state where there's not the conscious chatter that to be in truth. Like, people are generally afraid of hypnosis, but we often don't realize that most of the day we're in some sort of trance, listening to our own talking minds or the news or whatever it is. So we're constantly in these sort of different trances, mental trances. And so the work I do is to help people get into a very deep state of meditation, where there's less chatter and where there's sort of connection. I guess you could call it spiritual connection. Other people see it in terms of the subconscious mind. But it's a place where there's more clarity. Because I feel like the truth of what we are is awareness. It's just a simply sort of awareness. But our experience gets so condensed by these beliefs that we have, and the shoulds and shouldn'ts and yeses and nos. And so, I sort of got off track there with your question.
That's okay. That's allowed.
But what got me into it? I mean, it's just fascinating. There's weird things that happen in hypnosis. I mean, one of my teachers who does stage hypnosis, he'd bring students on the stage, and one student got up on stage and was in a very deep state and got up to the piano and started playing piano, some old piano music. And apparently his friends were flabbergasted because he wasn't a musician, So weird things happen, and I find it fascinating. So, yeah.
So, is past life regression like a branch of hypnosis, would you say, or are they completely different? How do they relate? How do they not relate?
Yeah. So the sort of the classic hypnosis is, quitting smoking, those types of things, where the hypnotist would induce a hypnotic state, a very deep state of meditation, and throw suggestions out, and hoping they land, and so that the subconscious mind picks up a new way to be without smoking, so to speak. And that works. But the way that I've been trained and that I'm interested in is really going into those deep places and seeing what emerges, what in a safe and gentle way. And speaking with the client as they're in a very deep state of meditation, and looking at what comes up, and until the subconscious mind sees through a belief that it has. In other words, the subconscious mind works in associations. It's not very logical. For instance, someone that, say, a little child, saw a spider while something scary happened, like mom and dad were arguing or whatever it was, the child may associate the spider with that difficulty. And so it's not a logical association, but there is that association. And that's the way the subconscious mind works. There's these associations. And the way I've been taught is to look at these beliefs and these associations and question them and see, like, is there a better way to look at this? But to get to your question about the past life regression, that it is different. I mean, it's similar in that there's a very deep hypnotic state, but it's a place where, the most common question I ask is, what's happening now? And what's happening now? And it's a conversation, and it's basically an exploration with someone there to hear and to listen to and feedback. And it's like a gentle journey in that way.
So they're both fascinating to me. But what sorts of transformations would people hope to achieve with either of those modalities?
Yeah. Boy. A lot of things, I don't know. I don't want to limit it, and I certainly don't want to sell it for something that that it's not, but the truth is that when you see something from a different perspective, things can shift. And, I work with people that believe in past lives and people that don't, and it doesn't really matter, because the truth is that there is metaphor, there is symbolism, and there is tremendous epiphanies that can happen. In other words, of seeing a situation that's occurring in life now in a different context, in a past life, one can see it in a new way, and see patterns that may emerge. And so I don't know why, but it tends to help with current life things.
It sounds to me, the other piece of this is, I think, with both of them, there's a need for tremendous trust for the practitioner and for the environment, right? Because it's a very vulnerable place to go deep into that well, as you describe it, which also is fascinating to me, because when you were talking about the mold and the Lyme disease, you were also talking about going into the well and feeling these things. And now you're guiding people through doing that within their own psyche and reality. So what would you say to someone who is hesitant to try this, to any of these with you?
Yeah, it's a gentle thing. It's not about ripping the curtains down and, like it's a very gentle thing. And it's hypnosis is not a truth serum. It's not, it's anything you wouldn't share in normal consciousness. You wouldn't share in a deep hypnotic consciousness. It's a very gentle thing. And, the truth is, there's a lot of misperceptions about what hypnosis is, because it's been on movies and the rest. And you see people on stage doing silly things. And so one of my teachers, who's a stage hypnotist, he, often you bring people up and have them dance or whatever, and some just wouldn't dance because it wasn't right. They didn't, it just didn't pass the inner filter. And so that's really important to know, that the subconscious takes care of us all the time. Everything, our body is the subconscious, basically, the way I see it, the way I've been taught. And it's there to help and protect. And but if someone's hesitant about it, there's no, it's a very gentle process. But if it's not for them, it's not for them. It's okay, but it is a gentle.
Yeah, I tell people, for the people that I work with, that ultimately they are in charge.
Right.
Their soul, their system, their subconscious, however they want to think about themselves. Like, I cannot go in and uncover or bring to light something that they're not ready to see, hear, and address.
That's
and
right.
They may not feel that they are ready for it consciously, but some part of them is, which is why it's coming up. Which brings me to, you and I did quite a bit of work together. So you've taken, we did biofield tuning, or what I called sound balancing. And you had been very consistent about coming in and addressing a few things that you needed to work on. Okay, two things. One thing I'm wondering is, how has it been for you, whether it's biofield tuning, sound balancing, or something else, to be on the receiving end and to be vulnerable on the receiving end, or to try to stay open? And then the second piece of this, I am curious, as a practitioner, what has happened for you through our work together?
Yeah. Well, I remember the first the first session. It was about a year ago, about a year and some time ago. And I've been going through Lyme, but I say Lyme, but it was Bartonella, Babesia, and mold. And I came to you in a rough, sort of in a flare up, in a real rough place. And it was just a powerful session. I mean, I don't know how to, and I'm being honest. This is an honest thing. And it's tremendously powerful. It's hard to, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's, there was, for whatever reason, my system is very sensitive now, whether it's due to the Lyme things or the mold or whatever. And this, it was more powerful than many of the herbs, many of the medicines that I took. And so there's something about it. It's like, how to find that place. And it's like, whoa, it's powerful. And I'm really grateful. It was a really big, part of my.
I feel like, from my perspective, it's been, whenever we work, it's a very physical experience for you. Like, as soon as I hit I go into the field with the fork, you're like, okay, I feel it here, which makes it easier for me to, get that feedback and work with you. How about the vulnerability part?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a vulnerable guy. Because I've been in, I guess it's only been 3 years in the healing with the Lyme and the mold, which is pretty short compared to, many of my friends who've been in it for a long time. But working with different practitioners, it's just been really interesting, because, you work with one and then, you try something else, and it's just this fascinating synergy that arises, and you can find your sort of intuition knows where to go when, and it's really powerful. And I've met so many wonderful healers like yourself and many others, and it's but it does take that vulnerability, because if there's that resistance, then it's not as effective. It's like,
again, because you're in charge, right? But one thing I can tell about you, having worked with you, is that you came in, you're like, just whatever you need. Like, we're very open to it, which made it even more effective for you, which I'm really glad about. Okay, so here's a question that I've been waiting to ask, because I have a lot of female guests on this podcast, and you're one of the male healers that I know who takes this very seriously, and you're in this. How does it feel to be in an I'm just going to call it an industry or area of practice, if you will, that is predominantly female?
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, I mean, and it's no mystery. I mean, women are in general more in touch with feelings and emotions and more intuitive. And that's where healing is. That's where it's all resides. So there's no mystery about that. For me, I mean, I don't know. I don't know it any different. You know, I don't know what it would be like if it was all men or whatever. But it's, yeah, I don't know. And I'm sort of an earlier practitioner. You know, I'm early in I've been doing this for about 3 years, and it's still kind of an early phase. So I feel like a newbie. You know, I feel like more of a newbie than I do a man in this field, because, you know, there's so many experienced people that have been doing this for a long time. And but some of the healers that I see are men, and I think that's really important, because you know, I don't know what it's like to be a woman, you know, not in this life anyways. And so, you know, there's certain things that I think it is helpful to have, to work with someone of the same gender, you know. So so I'm hoping that there's plenty of ways that I can support others in their journey as well. Yeah.
So if you asked yourself, you mentioned the journey beginning like 11 years ago, 12 years ago, would you have guessed that you're going to be sort of an energy-based healer?
No. No, I was.
You're a scientist too. And the other background you have is science.
Former scientist. Yeah. I mean, I guess you're always a scientist, but it's just funny because different niches have their own blinders. You know, I mean, the science world, academic science world, in my opinion, has some blinders there. And so yeah. But I worked in the science field for about 15 years, and then the universe sort of said, okay, now you're not there.
And now you're here. Okay, so one of the things you're mentioning on your website as a service is called support for men. So you have the hypnosis, the past life regression, and then another one is called support for men. And I want to read that because I think it's beautiful. You say, real men look at their wounds. Modern culture conditions men to disconnect from emotions and be tough. What if true strength came from looking at our own vulnerabilities?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I were man enough to look at all my vulnerabilities all the time. You know, in that.
Man or woman enough, right?
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I mean. And but yeah, I mean, those are big words, you know, to really look at the wounds, you know. The thing is, it doesn't take, you know, that it's looking at wounds is not the masculine energy. That's not what it's about. It's a more gentle, supportive energy that is needed when looking at wounds. And I think masculine energy is also gentle and supportive, just not in this sort of spun out culture that we are in. But yeah, no, I think, you know, I mean, I was always a sensitive kid. I'm a sensitive man, but you know, as I don't know what it's like to be a woman, at least none in this life. You know, to be an emotional man or boy is not, it's not always cool. And so there's a real culture there that strips some of the connection with emotions for men. And I know, well, I'm assuming also for women, but at least it's more acceptable. But yeah, I don't even know. I don't know how to compare today with when I was a kid. I don't know how to do that. Couldn't do that. Um, but yeah, real men look at their wounds.
Say
Those are
that, is it
big
worth
words.
I know. Is it worth it for men to look at their wounds then and get vulnerable?
Is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the only way. It's like they're gonna be there regardless. So um, you might as well work with them rather than you know just, it's just I feel like it's the only way really because it all comes around. It all um, um, so yeah, I think it's a really important thing to talk about, and especially men. It's and that's what we're talking about. Just men to sit together and talk about men things and wounds. Because that's not a typical thing for guys to talk about. Our emotional wounds. It's really not a normal conversation. In my
Okay.
experience.
One of the things you and I were talking about was you said something about our tendency to rely on others to validate our experience, and how
Yeah,
that plays in our healing journey. Can you tell us about that?
yeah. Let me try to explain that. I, you know, the way I would explain it is, and specifically in the Lyme world, and again, I use the word Lyme when I'm talking about Bartonella, Babesia, mold, all these sort of new diseases that aren't fully understood. And when you go see uh, a medical doctor, and they're all fantastic, you know, but there are some blind spots in the medical community now, and that's okay. There always will be. It's a continuing science. But sometimes if we go in there and they label symptoms a certain way within a box, but what it truly might be is something that's out of the box that they're not aware of. It's not addressing um, uh, the truth of what's going on necessarily. And I'm painting with a really big brush here, and I have a lot of total respect for doctors and everything. And the Lyme experience makes one. It's a difficult journey with sort of the medical profession. Anyone who has Lyme, many that have Lyme know this, but it's okay. And so what I mean is that this world, in my experience, this world is just a world of mirrors. And oftentimes we rely on other people, their responses to us, to tell us what we are. Like, oh, I'm a good person, or I'm being a jerk, or whatever. And we're relying on this feedback. And the truth is, they're not always mirrors. Sometimes they're warped little mirrors, like you see at the amusement park. That because we all project our stuff, we all reflect other people's stuff, and it's hard to terse out what exactly is a reflection, what is a projection, what's going on. This is like
who am I
what's
in
that?
the middle?
What's that?
Who am I in the middle of
Yeah,
that?
right. And so sometimes if someone's worldview is this, and you're out here, you're outside of there, they're going to see you within, they're going to put you somewhere where they can understand you. And if that's taken as like, oh, so I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but there's something about relying on one's own experience and with the feedback, because it's important to see the reflections in others as well. But it's a difficult game because sometimes you don't know if it's hard to know sometimes. So yeah, it's a really, I don't know if I even touched an answer to your question.
No, that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense in the way that, first of all, not just relying on those outside reflections to define ourselves, but making sure that we are connected within to see the vastness of our being. And then I like the part where, if someone throws a diagnosis at you, that's not all that you are.
Yeah.
And even within a finite diagnosis, there are so many layers of your being that you can experience, and so many layers of the healing journey. So what I'm hearing you say is that don't feel defined with what feels constricting or perhaps skewed in the reflections that you receive, but be willing to see beyond that.
Totally. I mean, I think each one of us we live in a different world. Each one of us. It's a totally different world because it's different. It's just totally different interpretations of what we see. And so one might act a certain way, and someone might label that, oh, that's this, like, that's this. And in reality, it's, well, maybe it's not. Maybe they're not seeing the depth of, maybe they're not understanding what's going on with that person at that time. So that's, yeah, we rely so much on having our experience be understood by someone else. And sometimes that doesn't always work, because if they haven't experienced it, we don't know what we haven't experienced, and we can relate to different experiences, but sometimes some experiences aren't had by others, and it can feel very isolating because doesn't feel understood.
So what would you recommend to someone who is on a self-healing journey and who feels that they haven't been quite understood yet, or they haven't began to understand? Because in the beginning you also touched upon how self-healing relates to self-understanding. So what would you say to someone who is on that journey but they feel like they haven't quite gotten there yet?
Yeah. I would ask, and this is something that I would suggest this is an inquiry that I do at times. I ask myself a question and I don't provide an answer. I just ask the question and feel. And I would suggest to them to ask themselves, is it true that they need to understand me for me to be understood? And for me, when I ask that, is it true that they need to understand me for me to be understood, or for my experience to be understandable? There's a clear no. I don't need them to understand what I'm going through for this to be an understandable experience. And this has been a huge part of my journey of the healing the last 3 years and the last 11 years, I'd say. Because there's times I often don't feel understood by others. And there's a lot of times that I do. But certain, just because it's not understood by others that haven't necessarily had the same experience, it doesn't mean that this experience is not understandable.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think you're also speaking very clearly to the wound of not being heard and seen and understood as a child, which lives on in us when our caregivers don't necessarily see us the way we need to be seen or hear us the way we need to be heard. So then we associate that later in life with maybe I'm not good enough to be heard, seen, and understood. But what I'm hearing you say is that no, you are. We are good enough. And then to me, the second piece of that, which leads us to healing, is first recognizing that we have that need to be understood. And not everyone is capable of satisfying that need.
Yeah.
But we can still choose and find ways of getting that satisfied, whether it's working with a healer that we trust or finding a trusted friend that we know will not judge us and just listen to us and hold space. So there are ways to satisfy that need, but not get ourselves down into the well when we feel yet, not validated by yet another person.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
how about healers? What would you say to healers who
I don't
are
know.
sort of like you, getting on to this journey, who are not only learning and practicing their craft, but also learning it about themselves as they step into the business side of it? What advice do you have for healers?
Yeah. Boy. Um, well, they're needed. I think.
We need you. The world needs you.
um, you know, what I've found in my own experience is that, there's always more methods to learn or like techniques and all that. But the truth is that it's when you sit with someone and can hear them and have their experience be understood, or at least, received. That's yeah, it's just that sort of connection, and that just understanding and support of that. Like, hey, yeah, this world is tough sometimes. This world's crazy. um, and so yeah, I feel like it's just about that. It's about deep understanding and willing to understand an experience that maybe I haven't had, and to be open-minded about those. And yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else to offer. I mean, the other thing I guess I'd offer, as because the work I do is that words are powerful, and it's not because they're powerful in their own way. It's because we've made them powerful, and so we're surrounded by such negative airwaves all the time, whether it's our own mind echoing things we've heard on the news and the rest, or if it's just echoing the not good enough stories and whatever. But the I do group hypnosis journeys with people, and I think about it. People often don't sit for 40 minutes and listen to positive, relaxing language. I'm not sure when we do listen to 45 minutes of positive, relaxing language. It's certainly not on TV, and I don't know where that exists anymore. But words are really powerful, and I think the more that we communicate in a positive and gentle and understanding way, I think that is tremendously powerful. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I got.
How can people find out more about you and your work? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I have a website called innercenter.org, and that's sort of, I'm not on social media or any of that, not yet. I'm not sure if I will. Maybe I should. But my website is the sort of central place to find my work. I do Skype sessions, and I do group hypnosis journeys, and one-on-ones. So yeah, that's sort of.
Yeah, and you're generously offering one free 2-hour past life regression session, which will include a basic astrological reading. Mm-hmm. So we're going to ask, as we share this conversation, we will ask the listeners to share it with others, and then just comment that you shared. You can just say, I shared, whether it's mentioning it verbally to someone you love, or whether it's sharing it on social media. We'll trust your word, and then Rob is going to work with one of you one-on-one. Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah,
This has been
welcome.
very, very a rich conversation. I look forward to going into it again and picking up the pieces, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience to talk with you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Dhamma. Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. And I want to say to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for showing up. And if this conversation, again, touched you in any way, please do share it. And at the bottom, I'm also going to include another resource which you can download by going to adropofom.com, ADROPOFOM, where I share a list of questions that will help you determine your energetic wounds. What are those wounds that come up between you and living a full, joyful life? So you can go to my website and download that, and there will be a link about that. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dhamma. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah.